Jack is just a trucker, or at least that's what the world thinks. But when the radio starts speaking on its own and a ghost appears silently at his side, the road ahead turns into something truly dangerous. Once an occultist, he made a pact years ago, soaked in blood and shadow, and tonight the debt comes due. Let's uncover the occult world together.
The night swallowed Route 66 whole, a stretch of highway as American as a backyard barbecue. But tonight the flickering streetlights cast uneasy shadows, and the asphalt hummed beneath the tires like it had a secret to spill. Jack gripped the wheel of his beat-up Peterbilt, a rig that had seen more miles than most men see sunrises, his knuckles white but steady, his eyes carrying the kind of darkness that didn't come from lack of sleep. He wasn't your average trucker, no sir. Sure, he hauled freight across state lines, but Jack carried something heavier than cargo, knowledge scratched into the dashboard in jagged, twisting symbols that no mechanic could decipher. He was an occultist, a man who'd shaken hands with forces that'd make a priest sweat through his collar, and he'd been paying for it ever since. Tonight, though, the rules of the game shifted, and Jack could feel it in his bone. It started with the AM radio crackling to life on its own, spitting static like a dying campfire. He hadn't touched the dial, hadn't even turned the damn thing on, but there it was, hissing and popping until a voice sliced through the noise, faint but clear as a bell. "Let me go." Jack didn't flinch. He'd heard worse over the years, whispers in the wind, cries from empty truck stops, but this was different. His eyes flicked to the side mirror, expecting the endless ribbon of road behind him, only to catch something else. There, in the passenger seat, sat a figure, pale and shimmering like spilled gasoline on water. Not a hitchhiker, not some strung-out drifter begging for a ride. This was a ghost, but not the wailing kind you'd expect from a roadside tragedy. This one was quiet, watchful, its gaze drilling into Jack like it could peel back the layers of his mind and read the fine print. The truck lurched then, the engine coughing and sputtering like something had its claws wrapped around the piston. Jack cursed under his breath, knowing it wasn't just bad fuel or a clogged line. No, this was the cost of that dusty ritual he'd pulled off years back, a deal struck with salt and a scream he'd buried deep, all to dodge a fate he wouldn't dare speak aloud. The ghost wasn't some poor soul he'd wronged, it was a mirror, a ripple of something he'd unleashed without meaning to. Mile after mile, the highway twisted into a mind-bending nightmare. Flashes of a wreck flickered in his vision, a mangled car he swore he'd never seen, while road signs shifted when he wasn't looking, pointing to towns that didn't exist. The road itself felt alive, tugging him toward a place no gas station map could pin down. The real terror wasn't just the supernatural, it was Jack's head splitting apart at the seam. Was he the hunter or the hunted? Did this ghost want freedom, or was it after something darker, something buried in Jack's soul? The radio crackled again, spitting words in a tongue he shouldn't understand but did, each syllable sinking into him like a hook. Out in the desert, the sand pulsed, rippling like a heartbeat under the moonlight. Jack's hands tightened on the wheel as he wrestled the truck to a stop, the sudden silence roaring in his ears. Then came the thumping, slow, deliberate, from the trailer behind him. Something was back there, something he hadn't loaded, something he hadn't signed for. His boots hit the gravel as he stepped out, the cold glow of the headlights washing over his weathered face. He swung the trailer doors open, heart pounding, and the ghost's voice slithered through the air. "You've been here before." The words hung there, heavy and accusing, as Jack stared into the dark maw of the trailer. Shadows twisted inside, coiling like smoke, and he felt the weight of that old pact pressing down harder than ever. He hadn't just made a deal, he'd opened a door, and whatever had slipped through was still out there, or maybe in there, waiting. The desert stretched endless around him, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It watched. The ghost drifted closer, its form sharpening just enough for Jack to catch a glint of recognition in its eyes. Not anger, not sorrow, but something colder, something that knew him better than he knew himself. He slammed the trailer shut, the clang echoing across the flats, but the thumping didn't stop. It grew louder, insistent, sinking with the pulse in his temples. Back in the cab, the radio was alive again, spitting fragments of voices, his voice, warped and pleading, mixed with others he couldn't place. The symbols on the dashboard glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the noise, and Jack realized they weren't just scratches anymore. They were moving, rearranging, spelling out something he didn't want to read. He floored the gas, the truck groaning as it lurched forward, but the road ahead didn't look right. The lines blurred, the horizon bent, and for a split second, he saw it, a silhouette standing dead center, too tall, too still, gone when he blinked. The ghost beside him didn't react, just kept staring, its presence a cold weight on his chest. Miles bled into each other, the odometer ticking up numbers that didn't make sense. The desert wasn't just sand and scrub anymore. It shimmered, reflecting pieces of Jack's life he'd rather forget. A diner he'd torched in '83 flickered into view, its neon sign buzzing like a wasp nest, then vanished. A woman's laugh, sharp, familiar, cut through the radio static, and Jack's gut twisted. He hadn't thought of her in years, hadn't let himself, but there she was, woven into this nightmare. The ghost tilted its head, almost curious, and Jack wondered if it was feeding off him, pulling threads from his past to tighten the noose. The thumping in the trailer grew frantic, rattling the whole rig, and he knew he couldn't outrun it. Whatever was back there wasn't cargo. It was alive, awake, and pissed. He yanked the wheel, pulling off onto a dirt shoulder that hadn't been there a minute ago. Dust billowed around the truck as he killed the engine, the silence thicker than the night itself. The ghost spoke again, its voice soft but piercing. "You can't leave it behind." Jack's hands shook as he fumbled for the flashlight under the seat, its beam cutting through the dark as he stepped out. The trailer doors loomed ahead, the thumping now a rhythm he could feel in his teeth. He didn't want to look, didn't want to know, but his feet moved anyway, drawn like a moth to a flame. The lock was cold under his fingers, the metal slick with something that wasn't sweat. He threw the doors wide, and the light hit something that moved, something that shouldn't be. It wasn't human, not anymore. But it had been once. Twisted limbs, eyes too many and too wrong, stared back at him, and Jack's breath caught as recognition slammed into him. Not a stranger, not some random soul. This was tied to him, born from that ritual, a piece of the mess he'd made. The ghost hovered at his shoulder, its whisper curling into his ear. "You called it." The thing in the trailer lunged, not at him but past him, into the night, and the desert swallowed it whole. Jack stumbled back, the flashlight clattering to the ground, and the road stretched out again, endless and alive. The truck roared back to life as he climbed in, hands slick on the wheel, but the ghost was still there, unblinking. The radio hummed, a low chant now, and the symbols on the dash burned brighter. He drove, the highway bending in ways it shouldn't, leading him deeper into a maze he couldn't map. The thumping was gone, but the weight lingered, and Jack knew whatever he'd let loose wasn't finished with him. The desert pulsed again, a living thing, and the ghost's voice came once more, calm and certain. "It's not over." The road ahead shimmered, and Jack pressed the gas, chasing shadows he couldn't escape, the night stretching on forever. The air grew thick, heavy with a smell like ozone and old blood, and Jack's mind raced as the truck barreled through the dark. He couldn't shake the feeling that the highway was looping, folding back on itself, trapping him in a spiral he couldn't see. The ghost's presence was a constant now, not just beside him but inside him, threading through his thoughts like a needle. He saw flashes again, headlights cutting through fog, a scream swallowed by the wind, metal crumpling, but they weren't memories, not his, not yet. The radio droned on, a mix of static and voices that sounded too much like his own, begging, bargaining, breaking. The symbols on the dash twisted faster, forming words he couldn't ignore. "You owe." He swerved as something darted across the road, a shape too quick, too wrong, and the tires screeched, kicking up gravel that shouldn't be there. The desert wasn't empty anymore. It teemed with shadows that moved just out of sight, flickering like a bad film reel. Jack's chest tightened, his breath shallow, and he wondered if this was what it felt like to lose your mind, or to have it taken. The ghost didn't speak, but its eyes bore into him, pulling up pieces of that night years ago, the salt circle, the words he'd chanted, the thing he'd begged to save him. He'd thought he'd won, thought he'd cheated the Reaper, but now he saw the truth. He'd only delayed the bill. The trailer rattled again, not with thumps but with a low, grinding groan, like metal bending under pressure. Jack's gut told him it wasn't empty, not anymore, that whatever had leapt out had left something behind, or maybe called something new. He didn't dare stop, didn't dare look, but the rear view showed the doors trembling, straining against the lock. The ghost leaned closer, its voice a hiss. "You can't outrun the debt." The road ahead split, two paths where there'd been one, and Jack picked left on instinct, the truck shuddering as it veered. The desert laughed, a sound he felt more than heard, and the signs blurred into nonsense, letters melting into shapes that clawed at his sanity. Hours bled into minutes, or maybe the other way around, time slipping like sand through his fingers. The ghost started humming, a tune Jack knew but couldn't place, something from a life he'd left behind. It wasn't comforting, it was a taunt, a reminder of everything he'd traded away. The truck's engine growled growled, pushing harder than it should, and Jack realized the fuel gauge hadn't moved in miles. The desert shifted again, dunes rising where flats had been, and he saw it, a silhouette again, standing in the distance, watching. Not the thing from the trailer, not the ghost, but something else, something older, waiting for him to get close. He floored it, the rig shaking like it might tear apart, but the figure didn't move, didn't fade. The radio cut out, replaced by a single voice, his clear and cold, "You knew the price." Jack's hand slipped on the wheel, slick with sweat or something worse, and the ghost's gaze sharpened, almost alive. The trailer groaned louder, a scream of metal, and he felt the weight shift, something rolling, something heavy. He didn't look back, couldn't, but the road ahead narrowed, the desert closing in, and the figure grew taller, its edges fraying into the night. The symbols on the dash flared, searing into his vision, and Jack understood. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a reckoning, a pull toward something he'd started but never finished. The ghost whispered again, "You're still running," and the truck jolted as the road buckled beneath it, asphalt cracking like glass. He fought the wheel, the desert pulsing fast, alive and hungry, and the figure ahead raised a hand, not in greeting but in summon. The trailer doors banged open behind him, the sound swallowed by a roar that wasn't the engine, and Jack knew he was driving toward something he couldn't name, something that had been waiting all along. The night stretched thinner, the air buzzing with a charge that made his skin crawl, and Jack's mind splintered under the weight of it all. The ghost was everywhere now, beside him, behind him, in the hum of the tire, and the road twisted into a tunnel of shadows, no stars, no sky, just the endless black. The figure loomed closer, its form shifting, human then not, and Jack's voice cracked as he muttered, "What do you want?" The ghost didn't answer, but the radio did, his own words looping back, "You promised." The trailer shuddered, something clawing free, and the desert sang, a chorus of whispers that drowned out his thoughts. He drove on, the truck a beast barely tethered, the symbols burning into his retina, and the figure ahead dissolved into mist, only to reform closer, clearer. It wasn't alone, others flickered into view, shapes that might have been people once, might have been him. The ghost's voice cut through, soft and relentless, "You can't stop." The road tilted, gravity slipping, and Jack felt the pull, not just of the highway but of something deeper, something he'd woken years ago and left to fester. The trailer screamed again, metal tearing, and he knew whatever was back there was loose, racing alongside him now, a shadow in the dust. The desert wasn't a desert anymore. It was a mirror, reflecting every choice, every deal, every lie Jack had told himself. The figure ahead spoke, its voice a thousand voices, his included, "You're almost there." The truck surged, the engine howling, and the ghost pressed closer, its breath cold on his neck. The road vanished, replaced by a void that stretched forever, and Jack drove into it, the symbols guiding him, the trailer alive with whatever he'd birthed, and the night refused to let go. The void thickened, pressing against the windows, and Jack's hands trembled as the truck plowed through it, the roar of the engine mixing with a sound like tearing fabric. The ghost's eyes glowed now, twin points of light in the dark, and Jack felt them pulling at him, unraveling memories he'd locked away. A firelit circle in the sand, a knife in his hand, a promise he'd whispered to the wind. It all came rushing back, sharp and raw. The figure ahead wasn't just waiting, it was calling, its voice a thread woven into the chaos, and Jack couldn't tell if it was salvation or damnation. The trailer rocked, something slamming against the walls, and he knew it wasn't contained anymore. It was part of this, part of him. The symbols on the dash pulsed like a heartbeat, spelling out a truth he'd dodged for years. He hadn't escaped that night, he'd bound himself to it. The ghost leaned in, its voice a blade. "You chose." The road, or whatever it had become, twisted sharper, a spiral sucking him down, and the desert's pulse matched his own, a rhythm he couldn't break. Shadows darted past the windows, too fast to track, and Jack saw faces in them. His, hers, theirs, each one a piece of the puzzle he'd shattered. The figure loomed larger, its hand still raised, and the truck shook as something climbed the frame, metal screeching under its weight. He didn't slow down, couldn't, and the void opened wider, a maw of black that swallowed the headlights whole. The radio spat his voice again, a plea from years past, "Just let me live." The ghost laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and Jack's chest burned as the truth sank in. He'd lived, but at a cost he hadn't understood. The trailer doors flapped wildly, the thing inside, or outside, howling into the night, and the figure ahead split into 3, then 5, then more, a legion of watchers closing in. Just like those watchers, always multiplying, always closing in. Our past has a way of catching up, doesn't it? If you've ever made a choice you couldn't take back, something that kept pulling you deeper long after you thought it was over, you're not alone. What would you do if you were in Jack's seat? Keep driving into the unknown, or stop and face what's chasing you? Let me know in the comment. I'm seriously curious how you'd handle this nightmare. And hey, if you're caught up in this ride and want more stories like this, twisted, intense, and unforgettable, drop a like and hit that subscribe button. We've only just scratched the surface. The symbols flared one last time, a warning or a welcome, and Jack drove deeper, the ghost at his side, the road gone, the dead alive and chasing him still. The air crackled, electric and alive, and Jack's vision blurred as the truck hurtled through the nothing, the ghost's presence a weight he couldn't shake. The figures multiplied, lining the void like sentinels, their voices a hum that vibrated in his skull. The trailer groaned, bending under an unseen force, and he felt it. The thing he'd loosed wasn't just behind him, it was everywhere, woven into the fabric of this place. The symbols shifted again, a language he knew without learning, and they told him he wasn't driving away from anything, he was driving toward it, toward the heart of what he'd done. The void pulsed, a living thing, and Jack's mind frayed as the ghost whispered, "You're home." The truck shuddered, the engine screaming, and the figures ahead reached out, their hands brushing the hood, cold and real. The trailer split, a crack of metal and a rush of air, and something spilled out, not one thing, but many shadows that moved with purpose. Jack's voice joined the radio's chant, unbidden, and the symbols burned into his hands where they gripped the wheel. The night wasn't just night anymore. It was everything he'd feared, everything he'd made, and it wasn't letting go. The void tightened, the truck a speck in its grasp, and Jack drove on, the ghost's eyes locked on his, the figures closing in, the debt alive and endless. The road was gone, the desert a memory, and all that remained was the pull, the chase, the reckoning he couldn't outrun. The trailer's remains clattered behind him, a chorus of chaos, and the night stretched on, infinite and unyielding, carrying Jack deeper into the unknown, the ghost at his side, the debt in his blood, and the story still unfolding. The void churned around Jack, a swirling sea of black that pressed against the truck's windows like it wanted in, and the air buzzed with a charge that made his teeth ache. The ghost's eyes still glowed beside him, steady and unblinking, a beacon in the chaos that he couldn't trust but couldn't ignore. The figures, those silent, stretching shapes, moved closer, their hands brushing the rig now, leaving trails of frost that crackled across the metal. The trailer's wreckage rattled behind him, a jagged symphony of torn steel and something else, something alive, skittering through the debris. Jack's hands burned where the symbols had seared into his skin, the wheel slick with sweat or blood. He couldn't tell anymore, and the engine roared like a beast fighting to breathe. He wasn't driving through nothing, he was driving through everything, a storm of his own making that refused to let him go. The radio hissed back to life, spitting fragments of voices, not just his now, but hers, that woman he'd buried in the back of his mind, her laugh sharp enough to cut. "You promised," she said, over and over, looping through the static, and Jack's chest tightened as the memory clawed its way up. Not her face, not yet, but the feel of her, a weight he'd carried and dropped somewhere along the line. The ghost tilted its head, almost amused, and Jack wondered if it knew her, if it was her, or if it was just another trick of this place. The void pulsed harder, a heartbeat he could feel in his bone, and the truck lurched as something heavy slammed into the side, rocking it like a toy. He didn't look, couldn't, but the shadows outside thickened, coiling around the rig like vine. The figure spoke then, not in words but in a hum that sank into his skull, a vibration that pulled up flashes of that night. The salt circle, the knife, the air splitting open. He'd thought he was clever, thought he'd outsmarted the dark, but now he saw the cracks he'd left behind, the gaps where things had slipped through. The symbols on his hands glowed brighter, pulsing with the void's rhythm, and he realized they weren't just marks, they were a map, a guide leading him deeper into this mess. The ghost whispered, "You wanted this," and Jack's throat closed as the truth hit. He hadn't just bargained for his life, he traded it for something worse, something that was still unfolding. The truck shuddered again, the frame groaning as the thing from the trailer, or what was left of it, climbed higher, its weight bending the roof above him. Metal screeched, a sound like nails on glass, and Jack caught a glimpse in the side mirror. Too many limbs, too many eyes, a shape that didn't fit any name he knew. It wasn't alone, others moved with it, shadows peeling off the void, racing alongside the rig like wolves on a hunt. The figures ahead didn't flinch, their hands still outstretched, and Jack felt the pull stronger now, a current dragging him toward them. The radio crackled, his voice joining hers. "Just one more mile," he heard himself say, a plea from years ago, and the ghost's gaze sharpened, cutting through the haze. The void wasn't empty, it was alive, teeming with echoes of his choices, every deal, every shortcut, every lie he'd told himself to keep moving. The truck's headlights flickered, catching glints of something ahead. Not road, not sand, but a surface like glass, reflecting back a version of him he didn't recognize. Older, harder, eyes hollowed out by something he couldn't name. The figures loomed closer, their forms sharpening. Human 1 second, stretched and wrong the next, and Jack's mind reeled as he saw her among them. Fleeting but real, her face twisted with something like pity. The ghost didn't react, just kept humming that tune, soft and relentless, a thread tying him to the past. The rig hit a bump that wasn't there, jolting him hard enough to slam his head against the window, and the glass spiderwebbed under the impact. Blood trickled down his temple, warm and sticky, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. The thing on the roof pounded now, each blow a hammer to his nerves, and the shadows outside pressed in, their whispers rising to a roar. The symbols burned hotter, spelling out a warning he couldn't read, and the void shifted, the glass ahead rippling like water. Jack floored the gas, the engine screaming, and the truck plunged through, the world tilting as gravity slipped away. For a moment, there was nothing, no sound, no weight, just the ghost's eyes and the hum in his skull. Then the rig landed, hard, tires screeching on something solid, and the void peeled back to reveal a place that wasn't the desert, wasn't the highway, but something between. Towers of twisted metal rose around him, jagged and black, reflecting a sky that churned with colors he couldn't name. The figures were gone, but their presence lingered, a pressure on his chest, and the thing on the roof leapt free, landing ahead of him in a tangle of limbed teeth. It didn't attack, just watched, waiting, and Jack knew it wasn't the enemy, it was the messenger. The ghost spoke, its voice clear over the chaos. "You built this." Jack's hands shook as he gripped the wheel, the symbols pulsing in time with his heartbeat, and he saw it, threads of his life woven into the towers, the ground, the air itself. The woman's laugh echoed again, closer now, and he caught her shadow moving among the metal. Not a ghost but something else, something he'd left behind. The truck rolled forward, drawn by a force he couldn't fight, and the thing ahead skittered aside, its eyes locked on him. The radio buzzed, her voice cutting through. "You can't undo it," and Jack's gut twisted as the towers loomed larger, their surfaces shifting with faces, his, hers, others he'd forgotten. The ground trembled, a low rumble that shook the rig, and Jack felt the void closing in again, its edges brushing the towers like a tide. The ghost leaned closer, its breath cold on his neck. "You're not done." The thing ahead darted forward, vanishing into the shadows, and the truck surged after it, the engine a howl in the stillness. The towers bent, leaning toward him, and he saw them, cracks in the metal, glowing with the same light as the symbols, spilling secrets he couldn't face. The woman's shadow flickered closer, her voice a whisper now. "You knew!" And Jack's mind cracked wider, memories flooding in, her hand in his, the fire, the deal. The rig barreled through the maze of towers, the ground splitting beneath it, and the void pulsed harder, a living thing that wouldn't let go. The ghost's hum grew louder, a song he couldn't shake, and the symbols on his hands guided him, pulling him deeper into this world he'd made. The thing reappeared, racing alongside him now, its form shifting, human, then not, then human again, and Jack saw himself in it, a reflection of what he'd become. The towers groaned, bending lower, and the woman's shadow stepped into view, not ahead but beside him, her eyes meeting his through the cracked window. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her look said it all, a mix of blame and something softer, something he'd lost. The ghost whispered, "She remembers," and Jack's throat burned as the truck hit another rift, the ground falling away. The void swallowed them again, the towers fading into black, and the thing leapt back onto the rig, its weight a promise of more to come. The radio flared, her voice and his tangled together. "You can't run," and Jack drove on, the symbols blazing, the ghost unyielding, the night stretching into a place where endings didn't exist. The void thickened once more, a suffocating weight, and Jack's vision swam as the truck plowed through it, the engine a desperate roar against the silence. The woman's shadow lingered in his mind, her eyes a brand he couldn't erase, and the thing on the rig pounded again, its rhythm syncing with the symbol's pulse. The ghost's hum wove through it all, a thread that tied him to this nightmare, and Jack knew he wasn't escaping, not the void, not the towers, not himself. The rig shuddered, the ground, or lack of it, shifting beneath him, and the night rolled on, endless and alive, pulling him deeper into the debt he'd never settle. The void clung to the truck like tar, a thick, suffocating shroud that muffled the engine's roar and pressed against Jack's chest, making every breath a fight. The ghost's hum was a constant now, a low drone that burrowed into his skull, threading through the chaos like a lifeline he didn't want. The woman's shadow lingered in the cracked window, her eyes locked on his, not accusing but knowing, too knowing, and Jack felt the weight of her gaze like a stone in his gut. The thing on the rig shifted above him, its claws, or whatever they were, scraping the roof in slow, deliberate drags, a sound that set his teeth on edge. The symbols on his hands throbbed, glowing hotter, guiding the wheel even when he tried to fight it, and the void pulsed around him, alive and relentless, dragging him deeper into its jaws. The radio crackled again, her voice cutting through the static, not a memory this time, but present, sharp. "You left me there." Jack's hand slipped on the wheel, slick with something warm, and he didn't dare look down to see if it was blood or sweat. He hadn't left her, not like that. He'd walked away from the fire, the circle, the deal, but she'd been part of it, hadn't she? The ghost tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing, and Jack wondered if it was feeding him these thoughts, twisting the past into something he couldn't face. The truck jolted, the frame groaning as the thing above leapt, landing somewhere ahead in the dark, and the void rippled, revealing flashes of that night, flames licking the sand, her hand reaching, his voice breaking as he chanted. The symbols flared, searing his palms, and Jack hissed through clenched teeth as they spelled out a truth he'd buried. She hadn't just been there, she'd been the price. Not dead, not gone, but given, traded to the dark he'd summoned to save his own skin. The void wasn't just a place, it was her, or what was left of her, stretched thin and woven into this nightmare. The ghost whispered, "You see now," and Jack's stomach churned as the truck barreled forward, the thing ahead darting into view, human for a heartbeat, then twisted, then her face flickering in its too many eyes. The rig shook, the engine screaming, and the void tightened, a fist closing around him. The woman's shadow moved, not in the window now but ahead, standing in the dark, her form solid for the first time. Jack's breath caught as he saw her, hair tangled, clothes scorched, eyes hollow but alive, and the truck swerved as he fought the urge to stop. The thing lunged at her, not attacking but merging, its shape folding into hers, and she grew taller, sharper, something more than human but less than whole. The ghost's hum rose, a mournful note, and Jack felt it. The pull wasn't just the void's, it was hers, calling him back to what he'd done. The radio spat his voice now. "I didn't mean it," a lie he told himself 1,000 times, and her lips moved, silent but clear. "You did." The truck hit something solid, the impact jarring his bones, and the void peeled back to reveal a waste, not desert, not towers, but a cracked expanse of ash and bone, stretching endless under a sky that bled red. She stood there, center of it all, the thing's shadows curling around her like smoke, and Jack knew this wasn't a memory, it was a reckoning. The symbols guided his hands, forcing the rig toward her, and the ghost's voice cut through. "You can't leave her again." The engine coughed, faltering for the first time, and Jack felt the weight of years crash down. Every mile, every load, every night he'd pretended he was free. The ground split ahead, a jagged mauve black, and she stepped closer, her eyes locked on his, not with hate but with something worse, understanding. The thing separated from her, skittering toward the rift, and Jack saw it clear as day. It wasn't just his creation, it was theirs, born from that night, a bridge between what he'd taken and what he'd left. The truck lurched, tires spinning on ash, and the void pulsed behind him, hungry to reclaim him. Her voice broke through the radio, soft but piercing, "You owe me," and Jack's throat burned as the symbols flared again, a map to her, to this, to everything he'd tried to outrun. He floored the gas, the rig groaning as it fought the pull of the rift, and she moved with him, not chasing but leading, her shadow stretching across the waste. The ghost leaned in, its breath cold. "She's waiting," and Jack saw it in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not revenge, but a demand, a debt he couldn't pay with miles or time. The thing darted back, leaping onto the rig again, its weight buckling the frame, and the ground trembled, ash rising like a storm. The symbols burned brighter, guiding him toward her, and Jack's mind splintered as her face sharpened. Older, harder, but still her, still the woman he'd loved and lost to the dark. The wasteland shifted, bones rising from the ash, forming arches that loomed overhead, and Jack drove through them, the truck a battered shell against the chaos. She walked ahead, steady and unyielding, and the thing on the rig howled, a sound that tore through him, echoing her scream from that night. The void pressed in, its edges brushing the arches, and Jack felt the pull split, her ahead, the dark behind, the ghost beside him, all tugging at the threads of his soul. The radio buzzed, their voices tangled. "You can't fix it," hers, and "I had to," his, a duet of regret and ruin. The rig hit a rise, launching into the air for a heartbeat before crashing back, and she was closer now, her hand outstretched, not reaching for him, but offering something, a glint of metal in her palm. The symbols pulsed, a warning or a plea, and Jack's chest heaved as he saw it. A knife, the knife, stained with years and blood he couldn't wash away. The ghost whispered, "Take it," and the truck shuddered as the thing above slammed down, cracking the windshield. The wasteland roared, ash swirling into shapes, faces, hands, moments, and Jack drove toward her, the rift widening behind him, the void hungry and close. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just held the knife steady, her eyes drilling into his, and Jack felt the weight of it all. The fire, the deal, the life he'd traded for his own. The thing leapt free, landing beside her, its form shifting again. Her, him, them, and the ground buckled, forcing the rig to a halt. The engine died, the silence deafening, and Jack stared through the shattered windshield as she stepped closer, the knife gleaming in the red light. The ghost's hum stopped, its voice clear, "You're here," and Jack's hand shook as he reached for the door, the symbols fading, the debt alive in her gaze. The wasteland held its breath, ash settling around them, and Jack stepped out, boots sinking into the ground, the air thick with the smell of smoke and regret. She didn't speak, just held the knife out, and the thing watched, its eyes a mirror of his own. The void pulsed at his back, a tide ready to swallow him, and Jack felt the pull, her, the knife, the past, stronger than ever. He took a step, then another, the rig groaning behind him, and her lips curved, not a smile but something close, something that cut deeper than the blade. The ghost drifted closer, its presence a cold weight, and Jack reached for the knife, his fingers brushing hers, the contact a spark that lit the dark. The wasteland erupted, ash and bone spiraling upward, and the knife burned in his hand, heavy with years he couldn't undo. She didn't let go, not yet, and the thing circled them, its howl a chorus of their voices. The void surged, brushing his heels, and Jack felt the ground tilt, pulling him toward her, toward it, toward everything he'd made. The ghost whispered, "You're not free," and Jack's mind reeled as her grip tightened, the knife a tether between them, the wasteland alive and shifting, the debt stretching on. The air crackled, electric and raw, and Jack stood there, caught in her gaze, the knife a bridge he couldn't cross. The thing lunged, not at him but around him, racing into the rift, and the ground split wider, ash raining down. She pulled him closer, the blade between them, and Jack saw it. Her eyes weren't just hers anymore, they were the void's, the thing's, his own, all woven together. The ghost's voice faded, replaced by hers, "You stay," and the wasteland closed in, the rig swallowed by ash, the night endless and unyielding, pulling him deeper still. The wasteland trembled beneath Jack's boots, ash swirling like a storm caught in time, and the woman's grip on the knife tightened, her fingers cold against his, the blade a lifeline or a noose, he couldn't tell which. Her eyes bore into him, a mix of void and fire, reflecting every choice he'd made, every mile he'd driven to outrun this moment. The thing circled them, its form flickering, her face, his, a twisted echo of them both, before it darted into the widening rift, swallowed by the black maw splitting the ground. The ghost hovered at his shoulder, its presence a chill that sank into his bones, and her voice cut through the chaos, low and steady, "You stay." The words weren't a plea, they were a command, and Jack felt the wasteland shift, the ash and bone rising to cage him in, the truck behind him groaning as it sank into the earth. He pulled back, instinct kicking in, but her hand didn't budge, the knife steady between them, its edge glinting in the blood-red light. The void pulsed at his heels, a hungry tide brushing his legs, and Jack's mind raced, grasping for a way out, a loophole, anything. The symbols on his hands flickered, fading but still warm, and he saw them mirrored in her gaze, not just a map, but a contract, signed in salt and blood years ago. The ghost whispered, "You wrote this," and Jack's chest heaved as the memory hit, her standing in the firelight, the circle closing, his voice begging the dark to take her instead. He hadn't meant it, not like this, but intent didn't matter here, only the deal did. The ground buckled, a tremor that knocked him forward, and she caught him, her free hand on his arm, steadying him as the rift yawned wider. The thing's howl echoed from below, a sound that clawed at his sanity, and Jack saw flashes in the ash, her laughing by a river, his hands on the wheel, the night he traded her for another sunrise. The knife burned hotter, searing his palm, and she leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. "You can't leave me twice." The wasteland roared, arches of bone snapping into place overhead, and Jack felt the void's pull weaken, replaced by hers, a force that rooted him to this place, this moment, this truth. He yanked the knife free, stumbling back, and she let him go, her eyes unreadable but alive. The blade pulsed in his hand, heavy with more than metal, and Jack swung it. Not at her, but at the air, the ash, the nightmare closing in. It cut nothing, the motion useless, and her laugh broke through, soft and sharp, a sound he hadn't heard in years but knew too well. "You think that changes it," she said, stepping closer, and the thing emerged from the rift, larger now, its limbs stretching into the sky, its eyes a kaleidoscope of their past. The ghost drifted between them, its voice a hiss, "You're tied." The wasteland shifted again, the ground leveling into a cracked plain, the arches forming a dome that trapped the red sky above. Jack's breath came fast, his mind splintering as he gripped the knife, the symbols fading completely now, leaving his hands raw and empty. She walked toward him, slow and deliberate, and the thing followed, its form settling into hers. Not a copy, but a piece, a shadow she'd carried since that night. The void retreated, its edges curling back, and Jack realized it wasn't the threat anymore. She was, or what she'd become, or what he'd made her. The truck groaned one last time, swallowed whole by the ash, and the silence that followed was louder than the chaos. He raised the knife, not to strike but to see, to understand, and she stopped, her hand brushing his wrist. "You don't get to end it," she said, and the thing growled, a low rumble that shook the dome. Jack's arm trembled, the blade a weight he couldn't drop, and her eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with something older, something he'd lost in the fire. The ghost spoke, its voice clear, "She's the debt," and Jack's knees buckled as the pieces fell into place. She wasn't gone, wasn't dead. She was here, bound to him, to this, forever. The dome tightened, the air thickening with ash, and Jack sank to the ground, the knife clattering beside him. She knelt too, close enough to touch, and the thing settled behind her, its eyes dimming but watchful. "I didn't know," he rasped, the words raw, and her hand hovered over his, not quite landing. "You did," she said, and the wasteland pulsed, a heartbeat that matched his own. The void was gone, but the rift remained, a scar in the ground, and Jack felt it. The pull wasn't outward anymore, it was inward, tying him to her, to this place, to the thing they'd birthed. She picked up the knife, turning it in her hands, and Jack watched, frozen, as she pressed it to her palm, drawing a thin line of blood, dark, too dark, like the void itself. The thing stirred, its form rippling, and she held the blade out again, not a threat but a choice. "Take it," she said, and the ghost's presence faded, its role done. Jack's hand shook as he reached, fingers brushing the hilt, and the wasteland held its breath, the dome glowing faintly with the red sky's light. He took the knife, the weight familiar now, and she stood, stepping back, the thing rising with her. The ground steadied, the ash settling into patterns, roads, rivers, moments, and Jack saw it clear. This wasn't hell, wasn't punishment. It was home, a world he'd built with her, for her, because of her. The rift pulsed once, then closed, sealing them in, and she walked toward the horizon, the thing at her side, her shadow stretching long and alive. Jack clutched the knife, its edge a promise he couldn't break, and the dome shimmered, the wasteland stretching endless around him. He didn't follow, not yet, but he knew he would eventually, because she was right. He couldn't leave her twice. Time slipped, the red sky unchanging, and Jack sat there, the knife in his lap, the ash cool beneath him. Her shadow lingered in the distance, a beacon or a trap, and the thing's eyes glinted, watching him still. The truck was gone, the highway a memory, and Jack felt the weight lift, not freedom, but acceptance, a settling of the debt he'd never outrun. He traced the blade's edge with his thumb, a thin line of blood welling up, and the wasteland answered, the ground humming softly, a rhythm he could live with. She turned then, just once, her face clear across the miles, and Jack saw her, not the woman he'd lost, but the one he'd made, stronger, sharper, eternal. The thing beside her nodded, a gesture almost human, and Jack stood, the knife steady in his hand. The dome pulsed, the ash rising again, and he took a step, then another, the wasteland guiding him toward her, toward them, toward the end he'd always known was coming. The red sky watched, the ground sang, and Jack walked on, the debt paid not in miles but in this, her, him, the knife, the world they'd forged, forever unfinished, forever theirs. The ash parted as he moved, a path forming under his boots, and her shadow grew closer, solidifying with every stride. The thing kept pace, its form softening, less a monster now, more a memory, and Jack felt the knife warm in his grip, a piece of them both. The dome's glow dimmed, the arches bending inward, and he heard her voice, not through the air, but inside him, "You're here." The words weren't a question, weren't a command, just truth, and Jack's chest loosened, the fight draining out of him, replaced by something quieter, something real. He reached her, the distance collapsing into nothing, and she stood there, the knife's twin in her hand, blood still dark on her palm. The thing settled between them, its eyes closing, and Jack saw it fade, not gone, but resting, a bridge no longer needed. She held out her hand, the knife steady, and Jack mirrored her, their blades crossing, not clashing but meeting, a circle complete. The wasteland sighed, the ash falling still, and the dome dissolved, the red sky stretching infinite above them. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The knives dropped, sinking into the ground, and the ash swallowed them, sealing the pact anew. She stepped closer, her hand finding his, and Jack felt it, the fire, the night, the years, melt into this, into her, into him. The thing was gone, the rift a memory, and the wasteland softened, the bone arches crumbling into dust, the plain stretching wide and open. They stood there, bound not by debt but by choice, the red sky their witness, the ground their home. Jack looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman he'd lost but the one he'd found, here, now, always. Her eyes met his, steady and sure, and the wasteland hummed one last time, a song of endings that weren't ending, of debts that weren't burdened. They turned together, the horizon calling, and walked into it, the ash at their feet, the sky above, the world theirs to carry, together, forever. If this journey proved anything, it's that the past always finds a way back. But what other secrets are hiding just down the road? In the next video, you'll uncover another story packed with mystery and chilling twists. Don't miss it. The next chapter is just one click away. Click now and keep uncovering the unknown.